Welcome to the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel.
All right. Hey, welcome to the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast. It was weird. I'm not really even sure why I was going to enter that way. I'm TJ. He literally clicked on the TJ Malden. Anyways, hey everybody, what's up? I say this all the time, but I'm grateful that you would take a few minutes to hang out with me and you choose to listen. I get this. You choose to listen. Spend some time in your day to hear what I have to say about some topic or subject. And I'm just really grateful that you spend that time with me. And I will say today, listen, if this has been beneficial, go ahead and like, subscribe, share, send this to somebody, because today we're talking about courage. It's something that I've been thinking about. I'm parenting a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, so the conversation of courage happens in our house all the time. You know, little phrases like, hey, you know what, we're going to do tough things. We're going to do things right away and all the way. We're going to, even if we're uncomfortable, even if we're a little fearful, we're going to do this thing. We're going to take this step because courage is important and courage matters. Well, I started thinking just more on the topic of courage, and this is what I landed on. I guess I could even the title of today's podcast would be something like this: that courage is the cornerstone of a life with limited regret. Courage is the cornerstone of a life lived with limited regret. You know, if you stay trapped in fear because of difficulty or danger, oftentimes we're not going to take the steps that we need to take. We're not going to take that daring leap of faith to ask that person out on a date, or to go after that job interview that we really want, or to chase that dream, whatever it is, if we don't have some courage, some element of courage. So today I want you to think about it with me like this. Courage is the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. Now that's the Webster's Dictionary definition of what courage is. And we're going to look at this for just a second, like even from a biblical point of view. And y'all know I'm always going to give you my point. So point number one is this today: courage is cultivated. When I started thinking about courage, and especially, I said it earlier, but like my 9-year-old, like I'm always trying to help him lean into courage. Like, what does it look like to do hard things? What does it look like to do daring things and challenging things and to take appropriate risk? This is what I recognize, and I'm recognizing this as a dad. I'm recognizing this as a pastor and a friend. Courage is cultivated. Like, no one wakes up, you know, as a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 30-year-old, and they're just automatically courageous. Now, I will say this: some people are born reckless, all right? But no one is born courageous. Like, I think I was probably one of those people that I was born a little reckless, right? Like, I'm gonna jump off the bridge into the creek before I find out, like, are there stumps down there? Like, I'm gonna venture off into the woods in the dark. No, are there any dangers? Like, that's kind of how I was oftentimes when I was young. So I think recklessness, you can be born reckless, but you can't be born into courage. Courage is something that's cultivated. And when I was thinking about the cultivation of courage, I thought back to David in the Bible. And David is a story in the Old Testament where David's a young guy. I mean, he's a teenager. And he's delivering some food. He's delivering some stuff to his brothers who are on the kind of the front lines of battle with King Saul. And he overhears this Philistine, this giant, like just defaming his God, cursing his God, belittling the army of God. And David's like, whoa. Like, this isn't going to fly. So he's like, like, what are we going to do? Like, who's going to fight him? Somebody go stop this, stop him defaming the name of the Lord. And so he was so ambitious about it. He was so courageous that everybody was like, man, this kid's going to die. Like this, it's over for this kid. There's no stopping him. And everybody knew there was no stopping him, to the point to where King Saul was like, hey, you at least got to put on my armor. Like, you got to put on my armor. So he puts on his helmet. He tries to put on his, I mean, you could just see this kid in this giant soldier's gear. And he took it all off. And he was like, I'm not going to use this, King Saul. And he was like, why not? He was like, I haven't proved it. He was like, it's too big. Like, this isn't what God has equipped me with. So he picks up 5 smooth stones. He's got this sling, and he goes out and he defeats the giant. And if you're churched at all, if you've ever been in Sunday school, you've probably heard this story. You've heard this preached, right? But this is what you recognize if you read the text. David was confident that day because he had cultivated courage along the way. See, he was a shepherd for his dad. He maintained and tended the family flock. And at some point along his career as a shepherd, this short-lived career, granted, because he's a teenager at this point, he kills a bear, right? He kills a lion. He kills these animals, kind of like he cultivates this courage. He has experiences to where he sees, I've been through difficulty, I've been through hardship, and if I can overcome these things, then man, why not step in this direction where I know I need to do something important, even if I'm a little fearful, even if this is going to be difficult, even if this looks nonsensical, right? That this giant is standing in front of a kid. What can a kid do with a giant? Well, he can defeat him if he has courage. And so I would say this, small victories cultivate lasting wins. Because he was courageous in these small things, and I get it, like if you say, man, bro, he went up against a bear. Like, these are not small things, right? But it's these little opportunities that he had along the way doing his everyday task. These tiny little courageous moments that no one else saw. There was no army watching when he defended the flock, right? He's on the backside of the desert shepherding some sheep, like just hanging out with the sheep, and like nobody's there. There's no fanfare. He's just being faithful in the small courageous things. And being faithful in the small courageous things set him up to have some lasting wins that really propelled him for the rest of his life. I love thinking on that, this verse from the Old Testament from Joshua 1:9, it says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And I would say the core of David's confidence was having a relationship with God, knowing that God was going to be with him, that he wasn't going to leave him, and that he was going to provide for him everything that he needed. He was going to protect him. In the same way, this verse from Joshua, like he's speaking to Joshua because Joshua's got a big task in front of him, right? He's leading the children of Israel now. Like he's taking them to a place of promise that God had intended for them to be for a long time. Most of the complainers and the old men of war had died in the wilderness, and now Joshua's tasked to lead this group of people to a new place, to live in a new land, surrounded by new kinds of people, new challenges, new difficulties. And at the hesitancy, I wouldn't say hesitancy, but as he launches, the Lord speaks to him and says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Don't be frightened, be courageous. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And you think about this, it's almost like God was saying, hey, bro, remember all the times that you had these small, courageous victories? You remember the time that you and Caleb, you went and spied out the land and you guys were ready to go into the promised land that day? Like, do you remember the courage you had? Way back when you left Egypt and you were willing to go into uncharted territory, you were willing to follow Moses wherever he was going. Like, you have had courage all this time and you've seen me move. So let my movement be the means of your courage. Let it be the fuel for your courage. Courage is cultivated. Hear me say this. Courage is cultivated in small wins. So what small things in your life that you've been putting off could you begin to attempt for the glory of God? I've heard it said like this, and you've probably heard it. I've heard many people say it, but they said, if you knew you would not fail, what would you do today for the glory of God? What would you do today for your family? What would you do today to chase your dream or to start that business or mend that relationship, whatever it is? What would you do today if you knew you could not fail? So I'll ask it this way a little differently. What would you do today if you had a thimbleful of courage? What would you do today if you had just a little bit more courage? What conversations would you have with your friends? What reconciliation would you seek with where there's been wounds in your life? What hobbies would you begin to explore even more? What passions do you have? What business idea? What leadership opportunity? What application has been sitting in what resume has been sitting in the email that you just can't push send yet? Like, what little step of courage would you attempt for the glory of God, for the good of your family, for yourself today? if you could have just a thimble full of courage. It's cultivated. So do something. Here's my challenge. Do something today to begin to cultivate the courage, knowing this, that God is with you. Like he's not somewhere else. He is with you today. He's with you in your dream. He's with you in your difficulty. He's with you in the fear. God is with you today. So do. Begin, start, launch. A second thing is this, is that courage is not careless. That's what I said earlier. Like, no one's born into courage. Some people are born reckless. But no one's really born into courage. It's cultivated. But it is not careless. It's not blindly attempting things for God. It's calculated. It's wise. Courage is obedience to God, to step forward in the difficulty, in the fear. Now, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the attack on Pearl Harbor and this moment in American history that's incredibly sad. It was really the turning point in the war, it was the turning point for our military in a lot of ways. And I started thinking, man, there were these guys, these kamikaze pilots, right? Like, their directive was, you take your plane, you shoot down any other aircrafts, but some were just tasked with, like, your job is to fly your plane into the enemy ship. Like, you are a suicide bomber, essentially. I started thinking, I'm like, man, that's just careless, loveless, calloused. Like, there's no courage there. Like from some cultural perspective, people say, "Oh, what?" But I'm like, that's so careless. Like, it's life destroying. It's not life giving. So, in the same way that I would say, like, don't just haphazardly move through life. Don't take unrealistic chances in such a way that, like, you could wound yourself or harm yourself. But, like, be courageous in a way that is intentional and calculated, prayed over, and prepared. Because there's a difference, and I'll say it this way, there's a difference in the kamikaze and the fighter pilot, right? Like, you have one person that gets into the plane and their intention is to do something that is daring for sure, but it ends in brutality and carelessness. And then there's another person who does something incredibly courageous. They're willing to climb into the same kind of plane and put themselves between something that's careless and the people they love. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, how could I have the kind of courage that says, you know what? I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm going to be measured. I'm going to be calculated. I'm going to trust the Lord. I'm going to move forward. This is scary. This is difficult. There are other planes around me that are blowing up. There are shots being fired, but by God, I'm going to climb into the plane and begin to fly this thing for the glory of God. Not in a careless way, but in a calculated, measured way. So hear me say this. If courage is cultivated, what little steps can you take in your life to begin to, in a calculated way, move forward in courage? Because let me say it like this, I guess. It's okay to do it scared. Because you may say, TJ, I've got the plans. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, I've seen people do, I've seen people go into a bunch of debt to start a business and they hadn't fully researched it and they ruined themselves. And so I had friends or neighbors or family that I knew did that. So I've never really launched into my dream. But you may be sitting there, you say, I've kind of weighed everything out. I've calculated all these things. Like, I feel like the Lord is with me in this. Maybe it's a church I'm supposed to plant, or a relationship I'm supposed to build, or a ministry I'm supposed to launch, or a small business I'm supposed to start, whatever it is. And you've done all the things up to the point of courage. Like, you've planned, you've prepared, you've meticulously thought out every detail. And even in your life, there's been these small moments of cultivated courage where, like, you've been successful at some things. God has illuminated your gifting and allowed you to see how you could be beneficial and you could be fruitful in this one area. And you've done all that you need to do, all the due diligence, and you're on the edge of courage. Let me encourage you with this. Courage is not always confident. Having courage does not mean that you won't be scared or unsure. It doesn't mean that your knees won't shake while you're stepping forward in the uncomfortable or the unknown. It just means that you're taking the step. Like courage is stepping into the difficulty, stepping into the danger, stepping into the fear, even if your knees are shaking. I mean, I think about this often. Things that we do around here at the church, they take courage. And even this week, Ryan and I were just talking about it a few minutes ago. Launching, the whole team has been talking about it. We're launching back into our sanctuary. We renovated our sanctuary for our traditional service, and we're doing some daring things. For us, they're pretty daring. Like in a traditional service, we're gonna have preaching on the screen. We put in this huge screen on the stage so that we could have a remote satellite service. And in South Georgia, like no one else is doing this. Now, if you go to Atlanta or some metropolitan area, this is kind of like old news. But down here in South Georgia, like no one's ever really done it. And so for us, there's been a lot of feedback, a lot of great feedback, but also a lot of questions, a lot of concern, some healthy criticism, some very unhealthy criticism. Like there's been this swirl of all these things. And it's like, I even had a conversation with another staff member today where they were like, I just need to bring these concerns to you. And this is what I recognize. Like we might fail. We might make the wrong decision. But as we've leaned into the Holy Spirit and as we've done all of our due diligence and as we've tried to lead our church the best that we can, this is the step that we're going to take even if our knees are shaking. It doesn't mean that we don't have doubts and we don't have fear. Like we're tasked to lead this thing. At the same time, you're like, are you 100% sure this is going to work and for the glory of God grow our church? And I'm like, I have no idea. But I know this is the direction we're supposed to walk. And so even with our knees shaking as a staff, we will go where God calls us. And y'all, out of all the things, we've always said this podcast is about life, leadership, and the gospel. I'm not going to sum up the podcast because I got one more point. I'm going to stick with my points. But here's the deal. If this whole podcast could tell you one thing, it would be this: follow God in courage, even when your knees are shaking. One step after the other. He will keep you standing. And even if you stumble, he will pick you up. Have the courage that was purchased for you on Calvary's Hill to take a step with God. And even if you fumble, like even if you make a mistake, I say this all the time and I take great comfort in this. God is sovereign in my stupidity, right? So it's like, man, if I make a left turn, God's better than GPS. He's going to get us back on track. You know what I mean? He's going to put us in the right direction. It takes courage to do great things for God. I would be remiss if I didn't say this. It takes courage to do small things for God. It takes courage to do the everyday things for God. And so new things for the glory of God are daunting at times. They come with fear. They come with danger. But they are absolutely, absolutely worth the risk. And this is why. Because courage is contagious. You attempt something great for God, and even if you fail, other people are looking in on your life and they say, man, if he was willing to take a step and take a chance on God, like he believed the scripture that God said he would never leave him or forsake him. They believed the scripture where God said that God was a strong tower, that the righteous could run into it and be safe. Like they trusted and depended on God, and they're attempting great things for God. Well, maybe I'll attempt something great for God. Courage is contagious. One of my favorite moments from history, 1955, Rosa Parks. She has this moment of quiet courage where she doesn't move from her seat. She stays. And it was this one person being willing to have courage that really catalyzed the civil rights movement from 55 into the 60s, right? It was this one moment, this one person. And there were other things going on at the time, obviously. There was bus boycotts going on. This kind of sprang into some bus boycotts. There was a lot of civil rights protests and walks and a lot of brutality. But it was one quiet woman who sat in her seat and refused to move. Like this quiet courage in the face of danger and fear and difficulty and a whole country felt the waves of this one person's act of courage. And then more people from every ethnic background, every socioeconomic background begin to band together to see something wonderful done for race relations in the United States, because one person had the courage to do the right thing, the noble thing. Think about Bonhoeffer, 1945, right? During Hitler's reign, Bonhoeffer was a pastor, and he began to press back in his preaching and his teaching, even in his clandestine communication. If you watch Bonhoeffer, the documentary, or read his book, he's written multiple beautiful works, but like all of culture was moving towards Hitler's regime, and he was a part of what they called the resistance at the time. And his brother-in-law as well, Hans. I'm not going to attempt to butcher his last name, but Bonhoeffer and Hans, and they even say this. This is what's cool. Like Bonhoeffer was obviously put to death, but like they look back at philosophers and theologians, Karl Barth, and even others that were kind of orbiting his circle, and because of his stance, because of his courage, other people began to speak out both theologically and politically against the Nazi movement, because one person had the courage to do what they felt like God wanted them to do. Their courage was contagious, and it started a movement. So check this out. Dad that's listening, your courage is contagious to your family. Mom, friend, cousin, aunt, uncle, coworker, your courage is contagious. If we sit in fear, if we sit in worry, if we sit in the difficulty and the danger, and we never take a step, at times, no one else around us will realize that they can walk out of the situation. What if people are looking to you to be that one step of courage? Like that one step of surety that, like, wait, if they can walk out, maybe I can walk out too. Their knees are shaking and they don't have all the answers and they don't know exactly what God's going to do, but they're still trusting Him and they're walking with Him. Man, that's courage. I think I'll join them. So what's your calls for courage this morning? This afternoon, this evening, whatever. You can tell I'm a pastor. I'm always going to say this morning. What area of your life can you take a step of courage in that could have lasting impacts for you and your family, maybe for your church and your friend group? The last thing I'm going to say this is, to wrap this podcast up, is the courage of the cross. When you consider the brutality of Calvary, the danger imminent, the difficulty, the humility it had to have taken for King Jesus to lay down His rights and withhold His power to cause pain to stop, to heal, to transform minds, to shift nature. Like He could do all of those things. You think about the courage that it took in Christ, and He's perfect courage. But the courage that it took for Christ to endure the danger, the difficulty, the brutality, and the death of the cross, like by way of a cross. What courage. And how many people have benefited eternally because of that courageous moment in Christ? Obviously, He is perfect courage. Now, I think about my own life. Like when you consider the courage of the cross, the things that I'm worried about today aren't very big. When I consider the courage of the cross, the difficulty that I'm facing, the danger that's around me, the fear that I might have, even at times might be silly. Y'all, there are moments, all of us have been here, where we haven't done things that we felt like we should, or we did things that we knew we shouldn't because we felt the fear of rejection, or we felt the sting of criticism. When I consider like the most someone can do is hurt me with their words or slander me behind my back, when I think about the courage of the cross, I'm like, why am I even considering these things? Let's just go for the glory of God wherever He's calling us to do, whatever He's called us to do. So what's holding you back today? This is where we're going to land. Considering the courage of the cross, And considering that Christ endured the cross so that you could have his peace and his joy and his courage. I mean, praise be to God that we receive salvation because of the cross, but you're also the beneficiary of all those other things that he provided and demonstrated on the cross. Courage in the face of difficulty, faith in the face of fear, delight in God even when there's danger present, knowing that what can't you do for God? What can't you accomplish in your life? If you stare at the courage of the cross and you begin to step forward, even with your knees shaking, into what God's called you to, what can you not accomplish for the glory of God? Listen, I say it all the time, but I'm glad you take some time to hang out with me and listen to my ramblings and musings on life, leadership, and the gospel. And know this, I really do believe courage is the cornerstone to a life that is filled with limited regret. Courage takes us out of our comfort and out of safety into doing daring things for God. So listen, I love y'all. Thanks for hanging out. If there's something that you want us to talk about or a question you want us to cover, anything like that at all, TJ Mullen Leadership Podcast at gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If this has been beneficial or helpful to you, any of these podcasts in any way, please reach out. Let us know. We would love to hear from you. See you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend. For more content, follow us on Instagram and YouTube. If you have any questions you would like to ask TJ, whether it is about life, leadership, or the gospel, you can email those to tjmaldenleadershippodcast at gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you join us again on the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast.